Good afternoon. It is 4 o'clock. I will call the Salina City Commission August 14th regular meeting to order. I would first look to staff asking for confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, may we have a roll call?
Mayor Hoppick.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Longby.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Will those who are able please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we do not have any awards or proclamations. That will lead us to the consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of the meeting of August 7th, 2023.
Is there any additions or corrections a commissioner would like to make to the minutes?
Mayor, I move the minutes be approved as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda item 5.1. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes 4-0. That will lead us to administration.
Item 6.1, first reading of ordinance number 23-11165, levying special assessments against certain lots of property to pay the cost of abatement of nuisances.
Okay, Mrs. Pack.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Debbie Pack, Director of Finance. Throughout the year, as violations are discovered, property owners receive notices of violations of property maintenance codes of the city. Those notices are sent out via certified mail, and they provide information on what the code violation is and how much time and what needs to be done in order to abate that, or fix that code violation. After that's done and after that time frame is done, the code enforcement officers go back out to see if the violation has been corrected. If it has not, the city then has a contracted abatement contractor who goes out and takes care of the nuisance, and then the property owner is sent a notice with the cost of the bill for those fees. They have 30 days to pay that bill, and that's all within the notification that they receive. If that is not done, state statute allows us to add the cost of that abatement to their special assessments on their property tax bill. Today's ordinance number 23-1165 details the abatements remaining due by individual tract and levies and assessment against the subject properties. Just for your reference, the total amount that was assessed this year was $106,199.99, of which at the time of the printing of this staff report, $30,526.36 or 28.74% had been paid. We did receive a payment today, so that will be the ordinance will be adjusted to reflect that on second reading. That left at the time of this reading $75,673.63 to be assessed on property taxes. So staff has come up with options for you. You can approve the ordinance levying the special assessments. You could postpone consideration of the ordinance to a specific time and provide staff with additional information that you'd like for this reading. You could approve the ordinance on first reading and provide us with direction, or you could vote to deny the ordinance, which would mean that the cost of the abatement would stay with the city. Staff obviously recommends option number 1, and then we'll bring this back to you next week. So I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions or comments to my left?
No.
To my right? Okay, are there any comments or questions from the public? Okay, if not, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 23-11165, levying special assessments against certain lots and pieces of property to pay the cost of abatements and nuisances.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 23-11165. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes 5-0. That will lead us to item 6.2.
Item 6.2, approve Charter Ordinance Number 42 on first reading, exempting the City of Salina from the provisions of KSA 64-101 regarding newspapers in which legal publications may be made and providing substitute and additional provisions on the same subject.
Mr. Hennessy.
Sean Hennessy, Assistant City Manager. Commissioners, what you have before you is a charter ordinance that would allow the city to eventually designate its own website as the location for official notices that have to be published. A little bit of background, we've discussed this before. Under the home rule powers that were adopted in Kansas in 1960, cities have the ability to charter out of statutes which don't apply uniformly to all different classes of cities. In this case, KSA 64-101 does not apply uniformly and has different standards for different classes of cities. And 64-101 is basically contains the requirements that have to be met in order to be a newspaper to publish official city notices, or to become the official city newspaper and to publish those notices. Some of those requirements are, and they're not extremely stringent requirements, but the newspaper must publish 50 times a year. They must be a periodical class mail matter, which means that they can mail periodical mail at a lower rate. They must have a paid circulation in the county in which it is located and not be a trade, religious, or fraternal publication. And the newspaper must be published in the county in which the city publishing the official publication is located, provided there is a newspaper there. So while these are not very stringent requirements, obviously the city of Salina itself does not publish a newspaper. Adoption of this charter ordinance would allow in the future, if the city commission decided to designate the city website as the official city newspaper, because these requirements would no longer apply. It is important for me to point out in this that this is not actually changing the official city newspaper at this point in time. This is merely a precursor step. And what this does is, if you vote to approve by 4 out of 5 votes, as is required for a charter ordinance, that will then start a process whereby after 60 days, the charter ordinance would take effect. However, this charter ordinance continues to leave the Salina Journal as the official city newspaper until such time as you, by resolution, by adopting a resolution, decide to designate either the official city website or some other newspaper as the official city newspaper. Since the last time we've talked about this, I believe this was on July 24th when we first discussed this. On, I believe, July 26th, so shortly after we discussed it, the Kansas AG issued an opinion that stated that cities of the second and third class were able to exempt themselves and to charter out of ordinances. I believe that would also apply to cities of the first class because, again, under the Home Rule Authority, it does not treat them the same across all different classes of cities. Additionally, we've also learned that while they have not completed adoption of it, both the city of Wichita as well as the city of Topeka is examining the possibility of chartering out in order to have the capability to designate their website as the official city newspaper. The city of Lenexa did adopt a charter ordinance in about 3 years ago, roughly, a little bit more than that. However, they did not then adopt a resolution changing that. So Dodge City, Hayes, and Inman have all already chartered out of this and are publishing to their website. The city also recently went to a new updated website, which will allow us to, in discussions with I still call them the IT department, CT department, be able to keep track of when notices are published. I think it's important that we do make note that we have gotten that new website up and running, and it is in place. So If there's any other questions for you, again, adoption of this charter ordinance solely lays the groundwork to be able to designate either the city website or another city newspaper in the future as the official city newspaper. It does not change the current status of what the official city newspaper is, but after the 60-day time frame, you would be able to designate the city website. Currently, right now, irrespective of this ordinance, you have the ability, provided they meet these criteria, by adopting a resolution at any point to designate a separate newspaper. But that's only for a newspaper, not for the website. So if you have any questions, I'd feel free to.
You talked about, since it's a charter ordinance, we have that 60 days. What can happen during those 60 days if the public wishes to know if there was some way that some.
Yes, the public has the ability to request that the charter ordinance does not go into effect. I'm trying to go by memory. I believe it is if 10% of the electors in the last election sign a petition, then they have the ability to stop that charter ordinance from going into effect. That applies to all charter ordinance, not just this one in particular. And that is one of the reasons why the charter ordinance has the 60-day period to allow people to have their vote and say on that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure the public was aware of that 60 days and if there was a concern that's how they would approach it. So thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments for staff? Nope. Am I right?
Moving forward, is there any reason why we can't go ahead and publish to the website as well as what's required to kind of get the ball rolling?
We can currently publish to the website. However, the website does not meet the standards right now that are in place to be an official city newspaper. So we would have to dual publish because, again, the current designated official city newspaper is still the Salina Journal.
Well, I guess that was my point, to dual publish to kind of get up to speed on staff publishing to it.
As far as the process and the other things, there is certainly no reason that prohibits us from initiating tests as long as we meet the requirements that are outlaid in the statutes until the charter ordinance goes into effect. Then we can effectuate an official switch over if that's your direction.
I agree with Commissioner Longbond. It might be a good idea to practice a little bit in the next 60 days.
Trial run.
We can certainly do that.
And as well as kind of public notice relations of getting people up to speed where to look for it.
Mr. Linkwitz, Commissioner Linkwitz?
No questions.
One thing to note that I think you're probably aware of, but just want to make sure, is this relates to where the statutory provisions require publication in the official city newspaper. There are other more open-ended sections or the language is not as precise where we would still feel an obligation to publish on certain occasions. So this probably covers the vast majority of our required publications, but there may still be some instances where, by way of advice from bond counsel or others, we feel like we need to publish in a
And that's the
print
discussion
publication.
we can have after the
Right.
60-day or whatever, if we stay with the Salina Journal or, again, look at the Salina
Correct.
311. Okay.
My understanding is after the 60 days, then we could take that question up of for those items that we have to publish in what's defined as a newspaper, then
Correct.
take up that question after 60 days.
Yes. And then one other point of clarification, if there's a successful protest petition that either prevents the action taking effect or you would have to place that on a ballot initiative.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions for staff from the public? Okay, if I don't believe there's anybody online, I will bring it back to the commission for action, please.
Mayor, I move we approve Charter Ordinance number 42 on first reading, exempting the city of Salina from the provisions of KSA 64-101 regarding newspapers in which legal publications may be made and providing substitute and additional provisions on the same subject.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve Charter Ordinance 42 on first reading. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That item passes 5-0, and we'll be back here in 60 days, or do we have to put a second ordinance, second reading next week?
But
Do we pass first and second, and then the 60 days runs?
Then does it,
that
the
correct?
60 days starts after the second reading?
After, actually, there's
Publication.
Well, and then,
following second reading.
okay. Okay.
Now, is there currently a gap in the time we decide here and when it actually gets published so that it's possible it could really be 3 weeks before?
Yes, we'll have to get through first and second reading, then we'll have to run the publications for a 2-week time frame. So you're probably 3 to 4 weeks out before the clock starts.
For the 60 days. Okay. Okay, we now have an item 6.3.
Item 6.3, authorize the mayor to sign the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce's letter to the Salina Regional Health Center and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas regarding rate negotiations.
Okay, Mr. Scragg.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As you are well aware, there's been a lot of conversation going on publicly or in the public eye as it relates to ongoing negotiations between Blue Cross Blue Shield and Salina Regional Health Center. This morning, the Chamber distributed an email which is attached to your staff report to their membership, offering employers and concerned citizens to, as they put it, sign on to their attached correspondence. Essentially, it encourages both parties to continue negotiations and try to reach some reasonable, amicable compromise. As a little bit more background, as you are well aware, the city of Salina is self-insured, meaning that we pay claims directly, but for stop losses and if certain claims individually get large enough, or if our aggregate claims get large enough, then we have an umbrella policy that kicks in. But we contract with Blue Cross Blue Shield as our third-party administrator for those services. And so as a self-insured customer of Blue Cross Blue Shield, the rates that they negotiate with their entire hospital network are what we then are subject to for our insured employees and family members. And then additionally, we've historically had participation from the Salina Airport Authority, the Housing Authority, and the Salina Library, where they are members. They, as employers, pay their employer's share and pay, and the employees pay their share. So as a collective self-insured group, our costs are dictated largely by the rates negotiated by that third-party administrator. Blue Cross Blue Shield's our current third-party administrator. There are others out there. So annually then, Blue Cross Blue Shield negotiates rates with hospitals, and those rates would apply for what they pay for a more typical premium-based insurance coverage that they would provide their customers, and also apply to self-insureds like ourselves. That has largely been behind the scenes in years past. That's something that we're aware of as a customer of theirs, that rate renewal and then our renewal with them impacts our insurance costs. But this year in particular, it's become more of a public conversation in terms of the negotiations between the hospital and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Both entities have released press releases. Both entities have released videos conveying their position, their concerns, kind of advocating for their position. And then most recently, a video and press release was issued by Blue Cross Blue Shield that essentially indicated that they were at impasse. And their wording was that, I want to be sure I get this right, but Blue Cross Blue Shield released the communication that was attached, stating that Salina Regional Health Center has asked for a significant increase greater than Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas's offer, and they characterized their contract negotiations as being at impasse. And then the press releases followed from there. So essentially, the Chamber has reached out to employers. I've been in conversations with some of those employers in the Chamber as well. They've drafted the attached letter, and I'll just go, it's very short and sweet. I'll go ahead and read read it for anyone that, with this being a last-minute addition to the agenda, that might not have had a chance to see it. It's addressed to Mr. All, the President and CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shields, and Mr. Phelps, the President and CEO of Salina Regional Health Center. We are writing to you as concerned employers and citizens of the North Central Kansas and Salina community. We are also clients of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas and Salina Regional Health Center. While we cannot know the specific circumstance that led to an impasse in negotiating your annual contract, we do know that the breakdown of this process is a significant problem for our community. Having a medical resource within our community providing quality health services is extremely important. We also know that insurers such as Blue Cross Blue Shield Kansas are critical to monitoring health care costs for the benefit of their members. We understand SRHC has a responsibility to operate efficiently. We believe Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas has a responsibility to ensure our community's primary health care provider can sustain and invest in providing the highest quality of services to North Central Kansas. With respect, we ask that Blue Cross Blue Shield Kansas and Salina Regional Health Center meet at the negotiation table and find a solution that is sustainable for both organizations and our community. I failed to mention that I believe Blue Cross Blue Shield communicated a September 3rd deadline to accept their offer, or they would not enter into renewal of the contract, so they are on the clock. This communication is essentially trying to encourage both parties to get back to the negotiating table and try to find something in the way of a workable compromise. I think you're also aware that initially Blue Cross or Salina Regional Health Center indicated publicly that rate transparency requirements made rates available from other hospitals, and they made reference to the rates that Blue Cross Blue Shield was paying to Stormont Vale, Manhattan, Lawrence, and Via Christi, I believe. Staff dove into those numbers, tried to do some analysis. The only data that we could find that was one-for-one comparison was Stormont Vale. There was a significant noticeable difference between what Blue Cross Blue Shield pays Salina Regional and Stormont Vale. There's also some data available of the rates that are paid by each insurer to Salina Regional here locally. Was able to do some analysis of that as well. It was noticeable that Blue Cross Blue Shield paid less than the other insurance providers. Having said all that, not enough information there to really be an indicator of how the health industry works, how those rates are negotiated, the basis of those rates, just a noticeable difference. As it relates to the city of Salina, there's no direct fiscal impact for endorsing and signing on to this letter. It's just encouraging negotiations, and I'm not able to speculate about what financial impacts may come as a result of those negotiations until they're finalized and we have some knowledge about what increases might take effect if they do. As an alternative, Blue Cross, Salina Regional Health Center could go out of the Blue Cross Blue Shield network, and that has implications for us and our employees. We are synchronized by chance. Our renewal with Blue Cross Blue Shield corresponds with their renewal with Salina Regional Health Center. So we still have the opportunity to go to market and solicit bids from other providers and pivot and not find ourselves out of network. I can't say that that's the case for all self-insured employers or employers in the region. It just so happens that our timing aligns in that regard. But with respect to fiscal note, this particular action has no direct financial consequences. Beyond that, it's just too soon to tell. The options that we identified for your consideration were that you could vote to authorize the mayor to sign the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce's letter to Salina Regional Health Center and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas as proposed by the chamber. You could vote to request specific amendments and authorize the mayor to sign as amended. Given the timing, the complexity of their communication to their members and others, I don't know how viable it is to try to propose an amendment at this point. But if you feel strongly about that, that's certainly something that we could take up. You could postpone consideration and provide additional direction to myself or the chamber about information that you'd like to take into consideration, recognizing there's a September 3rd deadline and an urgency for them to get to the table. Postponing may not be a viable option either. You could take no action, which essentially would not authorize signing on to the chamber's letter, and we would just choose not to participate. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
I don't know if I have a question. I do want to follow up a little bit and thank Mr. Scragg for his work. I know he's worked closely with the chamber and with USD 305 and other entities. This letter maybe took a little bit of a different tone the first time it came out, and I think because of the due diligence on the city's part, we didn't feel comfortable that we were just being given general numbers and not enough information to say one party's right and the other party's incorrect. So I think this letter, and I am being asked to sign it as mayor, and I want to let everyone know that my wife is an employee of Salina Regional Health Center, but I do not feel there's any type of conflict because this is a letter that we're just asking both parties to come to the table and try to do what's best for the community. And we believe that Blue Cross Blue Shield and the Salina Regional Health Center being able to work this out would be beneficial to the community. So this is a letter that we're really not taking sides. We're just asking the two entities to come together.
And I guess I should actually want to make a clear distinction, because I am an employee of Salina Regional Health Center, so there's no misrepresentation or any perceived conflict of interest. I guess this was an email from the Chamber of Commerce, which actually suggests incremental increases in compromise is not contained in the letter that we're signing. The letter that we're signing, I would hope all 47,000 people in Salina would sit down and sign. It's a very generic, general letter. Get back to work, see what you can do. If it gets to the point where we would be involved with a true contract with those entities, I would certainly have to accuse myself, but I see no problem advocating on behalf of everyone in town to just implore them to get back to the table. But the letter we're signing does not have any specific suggestions for how to resolve the conflict.
It's an important negotiation, and certainly, but I think it's completely between Blue Cross and Blue Shield and the hospital. But the back side of that is that the hospital represents everybody in Salina and the region, and Blue Cross Blue Shield pretty much has the same penetration. So it's what we do up here is to talk and discuss and try to negotiate things that I think the letter makes sense, that we should encourage them to do the same thing and not just draw lines in the sand.
I would underscore the regional nature. I've been approached by other city managers, city administrators from communities in the region, and they have similar concerns. Their employers have similar concerns. There's a lot of people watching, and the outcome of this will have impacts on a lot of people.
I know from the onset, from this side, I've heard about the concern about the impact of on the city's budget with the healthcare costs. My real concern is the impact it's going to have on the community as a whole, should they drop out of the network. And I think that would, I hope they can come to the table and work this out soon.
Okay, any other comment? Any questions or comments from the public on this item? Okay. Please come to, if you do, please come to the podium and give us your name and where you're from. Because I think you're new.
Yes, I am. I'm fairly new. My name is Laura Curry. I live here in Salina. I moved here in 2020. Who owns the hospital? Is it privately owned, publicly owned? Who owns the hospital? Just
Great question.
It is a not-for-profit. It's not owned by the city, so it
right,
is a
but
standalone.
who runs or who's behind the not-for-profit? I know it's a 501c3.
They have a standalone board of directors, and they employ their CEO and all the subordinate staff.
Okay. So I could just pull up the disclosed tax 990 form, and that would have some of the board members and all of
Yep,
that kind of.
correct.
So
Yes.
they're going to be the
Yep.
ones that are in charge of
Right.
the hospital and no. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, if there's no other comments, I'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
I move that this governing body authorize the mayor to sign the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce's letter to the Salina Regional Health Center and Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas regarding the rate negotiations.
Second.
We have a motion and a second authorizing the mayor to sign the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce's letter to the Salina Regional Health Center and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas as proposed by the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes 5-0. Thank you. That will lead us to development business, item 7.1.
Item 7.1, approve resolution number 23-8145, authorizing city staff to prepare and submit a grant application to the Federal Home Loan Bank, Topeka, for the Affordable Housing Program, selecting Equity Bank, Salina, Kansas, as the city's qualifying FHLB Topeka member for purposes of the grant, and authorizing the city manager to execute required memorandums of understanding.
Ms. Martin.
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Martin, Community Relations Supervisor, and I'm here today to ask for your approval of resolution number 23815. It's kind of in three parts. That's going to authorize the city to prepare and submit a grant application to Federal Home Loan Bank of Topeka for their affordable housing program. Also, it's going to select Equity Bank as the member, the FLHAB member to support and put forward that grant, and then authorize the city to execute, the city manager specifically, to execute the memorandums of understanding needed with this consumer credit counseling services entity in town in order to meet some requirements of the grant. With that, just a little bit of background for everyone here. You may remember that we had a March study session where we discussed the Live Salina plan, which is the strategic housing plan that's been adopted by the city of Salina, and some steps going forward. That plan had kind of initiated two different prongs. The first one was the infill, or the greenfill housing, which is the new development of housing, and then the second part was infill housing, which is kind of what you do to protect your current housing stock, your older housing stock. And the city during that study session was presented information that we were on track for the development side of it, the new housing. Everything's kind of in process, and asked permission and sought some guidance during that study session about the infill housing, the next steps for that. There was quite a bit of time spent during that session on where to start with that infill housing, which section of Salina was best, and in your blue sheet, and during that session kind of led down to one kind of targeted area. It was very specific. In order to be successful in those types of programs, it's necessary to not just gunshot the approach, to have a very concentrated area. The successful programs on infill housing, as the city presented, as staff learned and presented in the blue sheet and during that session, it really does require that you target an area. You don't just say the whole city is open to it. So there was a lot of time spent on that on which target area to concentrate on. And in your blue sheet, you'll notice that on page 4, there's a map there. It's really came down to looking at Census Tract 3 and a portion of that Census Tract 3, which is in the orange section of Census Tract 3. So for purposes of the grant, that's where we focused. And in your application today, that's the information we provided. Really, this is the best approach to have the most stability and the greatest maximization of benefits by concentrating in that area. Besides the concentrated area, a second key part to a successful program was layering the sources of funding. So during that study session, there was quite a bit of discussion about what different opportunities there were. There were presented some grants, and we've kind of narrowed that down to 2. The one before you today is the Federal Home Loan Bank Affordable Housing Program, which currently has an open grant cycle. So they're in the grant cycle process with the grant due date of August 18th. The other one is the CDBG, which is one you formerly had before, or the city of Salina has had previously in different sections at different times. I think we calculated about 600 previous houses throughout the years and several different applications of that. We don't currently have one with CDBG, but we will be proposing a new one to layer with this. The Federal Home Loan Bank, just a little bit of information, it's a national system. It's comprised of 11 banks, and the one for our area covers several states, and our area is actually located in Topeka. So Federal Home Loan Bank Topeka is our Federal Home Loan Bank, and that's the one with the open grant cycle that's before you today. The system requires that you have an entity who is a current member in good standing actually submit the grant. The city would be considered the sponsor of the grant, and a financial institution that's in good standing with Federal Home Loan Bank and has a membership has to actually do the final submission through their online system. And so the city decided the best way to obtain that in the most equitable way was to do an RFQ. When we submitted the RFQ, we had one approved applicant that met all the requirements, that agreed to participate with us, and they're here today, and that's Equity Bank. And I think Larry Bridicum is here in support of that today, and that's who we are proposing as the second prong in our resolution, that we'd like it to have that approval for them to be our partner. Then the proposal itself, just a few highlights. I know you have your blue sheet, but we're requesting $999,999. That was purely for the math. They have a pretty specific worksheet you have to complete, and that made the math come out, trying to maximize the $1 million that you can ask for. It's a 48-month grant cycle. It's going to enable us to repair and rehab. They have several different sections. You can't apply to be financing and repair and rehab in the same grant. We are going with repair and rehab because that kind of fits in our mission most right now and where we were assigned to go. It would allow us to do 44 homes. That can't be exact. It's hard to know exactly, but based on what the numbers we're putting forward and submitting, up to $20,500 per home for individuals, we should get 44 homes in there. There's some other expenses in there that constitute that. There's the administrative fee that we can have. There's a fee for home inspections and a fee for the memorandums of understandings that we have going forward with consumer credit counseling. But all of that, the individuals would have to be income qualified and meet at least 60% or below of their AMI that they use, their adjusted median income. They use the USDA numbers and have a chart they provide of what they consider 60% and below. They don't use the HUD numbers. That can be a little confusing, but they try and be the most generous numbers that they can provide for that. So that's the numbers they use. The other thing is I think it's important to consider that the individuals who will be qualified for this normally can't afford this money up front. So the $20,500 would go a long way to helping them make some major repairs. The grant application, they're pretty liberal in what you can allow for it, and they don't hold you exactly to it, knowing each house is going to be custom looked at. What is the best for this qualifying house? What do they need most? But it's things like roofs, siding, windows, porches, those kinds of things that really make the house habitable and salvage your housing stock. Keep it in use longer. That's the ultimate goal. As part of the proposal, the approved homeowners would need to complete a HUD approved and certified class. A homeowners class is what they call it. HUD has a list of certified providers. The only one in our area is Consumer Credit Counseling Services. And they've agreed, and we have a proposed memorandum of understanding that we'd like as the third prong of this resolution to be able to authorize the city manager to sign if you approve the resolution today.
You speak of homeowner, so we're talking about owner-occupied properties, correct?
Correct.
To make sure everybody knows it needs to be owner-occupied.
Yes, that is, in this case, the CDBG allows for a rental, and there's some other opportunities, but you would have to apply for a separate grant. There's a different track, different questioning if you were doing that. And the most beneficial at this time, where we saw the immediate need for this particular grant use, is the owner occupied for those 44 homes.
Thank you.
Good question. So we proposed to use $1 million that we've allocated, the city has allocated towards this infill housing, to be the money that would front those expenses and then be reimbursed back, because it is a reimbursement back program that you have to submit. So the Community Relations Department would be the one that would submit the paperwork to the bank. The bank would approve the money, and then it would be reimbursed back. But to not slow down that process and to make sure we don't lose the interest of the developers and the builders in the area, would front that money and then make sure it's reimbursed back into that $1 million. So hopefully it will not the same, but it would allow us that opportunity to maximize that amount we've set forth or already allocated. This model has been used, like I said, it's been used since 1976 on the home rehab grants. The city has already done, not before my time, I can't take credit for it, but before my time, they've done 600 or so is what we calculated in rehab projects. So it's something the city is familiar with. There are processes in place. I think we're equipped to do that and develop it for this. The grant does not require a match. There would be administrative fee up to 10% for each project that the city could do. That would of course be as the projects were approved, so it wouldn't be all at once. It's not one of those where you get the administrative fee up front, you get it on the back end on the reimbursement side. But the staff is recommending today that you pass the resolution 23815 and enable us to submit the application to Federal Home Loan Bank, approving Equity Bank as the FHLB member to submit it, and authorizing the city manager to execute the MOUs with Consumer Credit Counseling Service. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Mr. Linkwitz?
Not really any questions. It's just a shame that that 20,500 won't go as far as it did, say, 5 years ago, pre-pandemic. Because just in my head, I was thinking about just windows alone and roof. I mean, that's probably.
And that's why we're hoping for the CDBG to help some with that, and working a lot with the Chodo and some of the things they have done. I don't know if you're familiar, but they've done some recent rehabilitations in that area. We'll do our best to maximize and get the best deal we can, but I agree. I wish prices hadn't gone up.
Oh, no, and I'm all for it. I just was making an observation, so.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Are there any accountability measures to ensure the money gets spent where it's?
Yes, it won't go directly to individuals. It will be the city Community Relations Department application process. Us, the Community Relations, I say us, but our division will then make sure that it's paid directly to. The money will not be released directly to any approved homeowner to go out and hire their own individual and make sure it gets paid. It will be a very monitored process.
So someone's going to ensure that the work was actually completed and then paid.
Yes, there are
bills.
inspection requirements.
Okay, good.
This is great. I mean, it's an ideal program for keeping neighborhoods that might be on the verge of further decay from slipping below that minimum.
We're
point.
excited about the possibilities.
Yep.
So if I'm a homeowner and I rent this property out in that area, will I not qualify for the improvement?
It has to be owner occupied. If you also live in the home and you're renting, part of it, then yes, you qualify. But for renter applications, it's a separate process for them to do. It's a separate grant. They have different requirements, different numbers, different measuring tools. It's a pretty detailed process. And so when you select that type of a program, you have a whole new set of questions that come up in a whole different worksheet. So we haven't gone down that road, but it's something we're looking at. While the application is open, I'm planning to try and attain as much of that information as I can, because they only have it open for a short time once a year. And so I want to grab some more details on that. They do have an implementation manual that's 100 and some pages long that I've looked a little bit at the rental, but you do kind of have to pick and choose which one you're going to do when you do your application.
And this is a little bit off of the 3 decision points, but maybe you've got enough track record to comment. If someone, does this type of incentive tend to encourage home improvement people to seek out the homeowners? I mean, they might.
You mean that as far as the builders go, to seek out the homeowners?
I'm a windows guy, or I'm a foundation guy, and I know this money's available. I potentially could go into that track and try to help people
I might defer because I don't have past experience to know that much about what developers do, but I'm sure Lauren Driscoll, the department director, will have an answer.
Typically what we'll do in a process like this, because we're doing a significant amount of homes in that area and we plan on doubling up with CDBG, we also plan on incorporating the neighborhood revitalization area in there so that we're also deferring property taxes to kind of wean people into those improvements. So that's a 10-year program, first 5 years 0, and then 50% that last 5 years. And then Chodo's doing weatherization, so we'd also bundle that with it on top. Because we're doing all that, we're going to be doing some bulk purchasing, bulk roofs, bulk windows, those types of things. So I think one of the things we've looked at is in a project like this, you have to go and put inspectors out, and once you get qualifying applications, they're going to go inspect the home and say, these are the essential things necessary. There's some nicer things on top, but we got to get to what keeps the home stable, safe, and healthy. So once those are identified, and let's say we've got 10 homes all qualified, and all of them need foundation work, the logical thing to do would be to put that RFP out for all of that foundation work at once. So we'll be working with contractors in the area to let them know, hey, this is where you want to be keeping an eye on RFPs that are going out for this type of work. But it's not going to be the type of situation where they're going to go to each homeowner and say, hey, I can fix your roof or whatever. The answer would be go talk to the city if you've got, a deal you want to make. But we have a process for that. But happy to let you apply when we put it out there. But essentially, after those inspections, we then go through that bidding process. If they're one-off specialty things, we're still gonna have to put that out to bid. And then we have a contractor is hired, that's done, the receipts are received, and then that contractor is paid. So really the homeowner's biggest piece is to make sure they qualify for the application, and then we handle a lot of the administrative side of the work. Does that help?
Good. Oh, yes, it does. I just thought maybe this is falling completely on the homeowner, and I'm glad to know that got that support.
Yeah.
A quick question I had. We're talking about, approximately 44 homes. How many homes are in this census tract that we're doing approximately, do you know?
Well, it's a portion of the census tract.
Yeah.
Right,
Amanda,
but that portion
I
that
do
we-
have that number. I didn't bring it exactly with me. I want to say it's
778.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
I knew Amanda.
Knew somebody would probably have that, so.
It is in the blue sheet. Yeah.
I get. The other thing is, and I can't remember, is there a minimum amount that can be spent on a home?
Yes, it's $3,500 according to the grant
Okay,
application.
35.
You have to
Okay, I
spend at
couldn't-
least $3,500 for the grant.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, this is a lot of this stuff we've been talking about for a long time, the infill, so it's exciting. Are there any comments or questions from the public on this item?
Do sit down.
Carol Reed, Salina. I was just wondering, you guys all know where this track is, and I was wondering, I think it was the orange area? Is that what you said? So I was just curious as where that's at, what location, and also is this income-based, or do people have to qualify by income?
Yeah, I will let Michelle answer that, and we'll see.
Yes, it's, if you could see on the map up there, it's around the Broadway corridor area is what we call it. So State Street is the north border, and it's in that orange area in that track 3 there. So it's around it's in what they call the Broadway corridor. I want to say it's College Street on the south, is that right?
On the west?
On the west side of it, and then it goes to
Broadway on the east.
Broadway on the east.
I just couldn't tell the south.
Yeah.
Is that Crawford?
So that's the area that we're looking at. And as far as the question on the income-based side, yes, they would have to be income-based qualified based on it's 60% is the maximum, 60% of AMI, and that's using the AMI and the details from Federal Home Loan Bank. They rely on USDA's numbers, and they have a quadrant or a table that we apply based on housing size and what's income-based and where you fall in that. Yeah, they have maximum amounts.
Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, I'm going to have Amanda, she was our Lead for America fellow, kind of talk about this. This is possibly This is a very complicated grant. That's why a lot of people don't apply for it, but it's a very solid, steady form of money to do this kind of work, which is one of the reasons we're going after it. It's not a state program or a federal program, it's different, but it's specifically to do this kind of rehab work, but it is very point-based. Every question has a point value, so you're trying to build a program that works for you, plus you get these optimal points in the grant, which makes it complicated. Just even leading up to this, we had to do a ton of research to justify a target area. So Amanda, our Leave for America Kansas fellow, did a lot of this research, which included multiple surveys and a ton of data analysis to really narrow it down to this very spot. So Amanda, if you want to elaborate a little.
Hi, Amanda Jarvis. Nice to see you all again. So more specifically, Tract 3 is a qualified census tract, which basically means that based off of the Census Bureau and all of the data that they gather, this is an LMI tract, low and moderate income tract, which means that of the people who live there based off of census data, 51% or more of the population within that area are below the area median income. Census tract does operate off of HUD numbers, so they're a little bit different based off of, you know, the grant numbers and the HUD numbers, but it actually works in favor because the LMI distinction level for USDA is actually higher than HUD, so more of Tract 3 population is actually going to qualify for this grant. The boundaries of Tract 3, specific on the north, and 9th coming down the middle, and Crawford on the bottom, and then it goes all the way out to the highway. And so more specifically, well, I guess I should say, of Tract 3, anybody in Tract 3 is going to be able to apply. So based off of the grant, Tract 3 is our area. Us personally, we know that in our community, we need a higher target focus area, and that's what's in the orange area. And that's what we talked about during the study session. That's what, like, basically honing in on a 10 by 10 block to really make a noticeable visual impact on the homes in that community. And those borders are State Street on the north, South on the south, conveniently, Broadway over on the west, and lining up with 9th on the east. So there's a focus area within the broader application area. And then I don't think that it's something that was noted, but traditional boundaries of North Salina actually come all the way down to State Street. So there is a portion of North Salina that is eligible for this grant, which I think is pretty cool because I was kind of, it was definitely a North Salina or this area kind of conversation when it got down to the wire of evaluating. So did that answer the question as far as the location of the things?
As the maximum income?
Maximum? It
kind of depends. It's
varies.
not based on, like, you can't make more than $30,000 a year. It's based on your whole family's household income, the number of people in that household. There's a formula, basically, we run it through. But just even starting in Tract 3, make sure that we're hitting that low to moderate income level, and then you run each application through that formula to make sure they qualify. So, yeah, I mean, we also had to, even to start down this road, one of the things we went over the commission was something called a HIAC, and it's like a Housing Equitability Assistance Commission, and it was basically all the entities that are state and federal, plus Federal Home Loan Bank, that do these types of rehab grants for any type of housing, and had to do a massive interview with them, which we prepared data to show that we're even eligible to apply for their grants, because they don't want us going through all of this if we can't even qualify. So this area has also been run through that process to make sure it's eligible.
Okay.
If you can't tell, it's taken 3 of us to get this application because it's been a little bit of work.
As you said, it's not easy. It was complicated, so thank you.
You're outside that area.
I'm sorry, if you have any questions, you need to come up here because nobody else listening to this bill to hear, so. Okay, anyone else? Okay, all right, well,
One question. I'm assuming of those 700 houses, we already know which ones are owner occupied. or a rough idea, maybe? I mean, just so that those folks get targeted, because if they don't hear about the program, obviously they're not going to apply for it. But
So you're familiar with the conversations we've had about rentals and, we can't permit them or license them or things like that. We did try to look at data about, utility ownership like water, and if it was owned by somebody who's residing in the home or it seemed like it had out-of-state ownership, trying to derive some of that data. Also, we did quite an extensive exercise using utility billing to try and reach out to people and get surveys back from individuals in that larger area, because CDBG also offers an ability to get up to $200,000 for infrastructure improvement, but you have to have very specific income qualification. So in order to even see if we could qualify for this, we had to do the survey of every home. We also walked that neighborhood for over a week with staff and volunteers trying to collect data. I think we hit, just about 200?
250 was our final count.
250 responses. We still couldn't quite make the right number for CDBG for the infrastructure piece, but we do have a really good stack of who would possibly be qualified for that area. Plus, both grants require additional outreach once you get the grants to make sure there's notification requirements.
thank you.
And it does state here they estimate 282 are rentals and 346 are owner occupied.
I missed that. Okay,
So
thank you.
that's over 60% occupied owners.
Okay, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve resolution number 238145, authorizing city staff to prepare and submit a grant application to the Federal Home Loan Bank Topeka, FHLB Topeka, for the Affordable Housing Program, selecting Equity Bank, Salina, Kansas, as the city's qualifying FHLB Topeka member for purposes of the grant, and authorizing the city manager to execute required memorandums of understanding.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 23-8145, authorizing city staff to prepare and submit a grant application to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Topeka for the Affordable Housing Program, selecting Equity Bank, Salina, Kansas, as the city's qualifying FHLB Topeka member for purposes of the grant, and authorizing the city manager to execute required memorandums of understanding. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That item passes 5-0. Thank you, ladies, and good work. Although the work has just begun. Yeah, I was going to say. Okay. Okay, that is everything we had on our agenda, except I will bring it back to the commission for other business. Is there an item a commissioner would like to bring before? I do have one. I know we've been receiving a significant amount of emails and stuff about our potential homeless issue and what's going on at 7th Street behind the old Chicago building. And I've talked to city manager a little bit about this and was wanting to get some input from the commission, but we keep being asked some questions, and I'm not sure I have enough information to give them adequate answers. And so I think at some point we need to have our Human Relations Department, along with whether it's Salina Grace, the mission, the Rescue Mission, and the Police Department, to actually go out to the individuals, not only on 7th Street, but some of our other locations where there's homeless, and ask some questions, try to find out what services they're using. Are these individuals from Salina, and if not, what brought them here? Are there family members we can contact that can perhaps help them? What can we do to help in their long-term planning to actually get them off the street if that's something they would have as a goal? I know I drove through there. Again, my office is on 7th Street. I drive by there a lot in the evenings and sometimes in the early morning. And I think at some point we're going to have to define the difference between loitering and camping. We've set a camping ordinance, and I think there's a little bit of this, question there as to how do we actually define that, because we did pass a camping ordinance, and I do see people there, and it concerns me a little bit that there's people actually laying in the parking stalls in that parking lot. I think it's a safety concern that we need to be aware of. I think we somehow between that group, we need to try to define, how we address that. Do we need a curfew? I know we're looking at some other items, so I think there's some things that we maybe need to be proactive on and get some other members of the community involved in and try to find out exactly what we have there.
That's a good point in terms of, because if that was a private parking lot and you had people essentially basically obstructing parking spots, they would have the right as a private property owner to say, hey, this is not what this is for. You're misusing this space. And it seems like because it's public, it's just they have carte blanche to do whatever and essentially have a impromptu tailgate, if you will. I guess you need a car for that though, or a truck. But it just seems like we've somehow along the line, the case law has created a dynamic where as a public entity, we've lost some of our rights. And I don't know if council has any insight to that or if that's just the way it is.
I'm not counsel, but I'll try to jump in a little bit. We have certainly been looking at those. We've been reporting out and summarizing kind of topic by topic, whether it's loitering, public disturbance, what the case law is, what our options are. We haven't, with respect to the parking question in particular, we've identified that as part of our special event processing, I think that was unintentionally moved, and we're looking at putting it back, amending the code back to the point that you need a special event permit to use a parking lot for purposes other than vehicle parking. Having said that, it's still a function of catching them in the act, and I think part of the conversation the mayor and that I had was, I don't know that we're going to enforce our way out of homelessness. That's not to say that the enforcement activities don't need to continue. I shared with you in the city manager's update, the most recent statistics are our camping enforcement, our public urination enforcement, our park curfew enforcement is up as high as it's ever been. And you can see that cycle of citation, failure to appear, issuance of a warrant, appear in court, found almost 100% conviction rate, non-payment, put them on a payment plan, and staff had a meeting this morning. We were talking about that, and I think my comment was if I were to turn that into a graphic, it would be a circle because you're right back to citation, failure to appear, start that cycle over again. There's certain things that I think we can do in the way of enforcement and try to move them on a case-by-case basis. I think you're going to see that return. I think the conversation that I've had with Chad Young with Salina Grace recently was along the same lines as the mayor's comments, that on a case-by-case basis, trying to figure out what their individual story is, what their individual mental condition is, what their individual addiction condition may be, whether they have family that they want to be reunified with and would welcome them back, and trying to address those on a more of a case-by-case basis. So be happy to report out in some summary form to you all the conversations that have taken place, all the activity that's going on. And I'm certainly not making excuses. I'm not saying that we don't try, but I have kind of adopted the mantra that we're not going to enforce our way out of homelessness. Not to say that we don't continue our enforcement activities, but I think we are going to need to have a conversation about our willingness to commit resources to programs and assistance and things beyond citations.
And I guess that was part of what I was getting at, is not just because the citations, you can cite, in the way I understand, they don't stack on top of each other, so there's no jail, so just because you've cited somebody doesn't mean they don't continue to do the same thing. Part of my concern is finding out where they're at in life, and is there something we can do to help, whatever that is, to get them back into, with, like you said, are their family members willing to take them in and to help? Or, what can we actually do to try to help the situation? I'm not so sure that some of the people that we see there during the day, I'm not so sure some of them don't have housing. That's the other thing.
Definitely
to
do.
find out how many have housing and how many don't. So I guess
We know from interactions with them that quite a few of them do. They live in the area and they congregate there.
there. So
Well, I think it's important that people know that from the city's perspective, people just think we're ignoring the problem, and we are not. There has been a lot of time and effort and no easy solutions. If there were an easy solution, someone would have come up with it many, many days ago. But what has happened recently is the bushes and shrubs around the 7th Street area, that's the most visible area of the problem. It's more widespread than 7th Street, but that's most visible. The bushes have been removed, the bathrooms have been closed, and it's made little difference. So we are trying, and last night I saw a program on Cheryl Atkinson's show about the Tenderloin neighborhood in San Francisco. It was the worst of the worst in the country, and they have made improvements there. They did get people on the ground, and they did enforce the laws. So there's a lot of examples of what works, and I think we need to just keep working at it.
Well, are the bathrooms closed 24/7 now, or just
Yes.
certain parts of the day?
They're currently closed 24/7. As a pilot measure, we had considerable feedback that was contributing to the homelessness and that would be a solution. So as a pilot approach, we closed them and have not seen that be effective.
Are we keeping in touch with the neighbors to find out what the substitute restroom has become?
We are, as well as law enforcement, parks, and SDI are all eyes on the ground in that regard.
okay.
Circling back to that issue with the parking lot, and I don't get too far in the weeds, but it just occurred to me, are we in an actionable position if we're allowing somebody, presumably intoxicated individual, to our parking lot, and then let's say we have somebody who's coming in to utilize the parking lot the way it's intended with the vehicle, and then somebody has a mishap and becomes, pardon the term, curb pizza. And I mean, are we liable potentially? Because it seems like if we're just driving by, but okay, well, there's the drunk guys hanging out again, and it just becomes part of the scenery. I don't know, it feels like we could really be sticking our necks out if we're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, the surprising thing to me, frankly, was public intoxication is not so much a citable offense unless, in and of itself, if there's some action that they're doing that's illegal. I mean, the sense of obligation is to address people that are publicly intoxicated and get them off the street, cite them, and that's not the case anymore.
I understand. It's just frustrating because I'm looking at it from the perspective of a private property owner, and if any of us in our homes have somebody who's disruptive and intoxicated, we have the right and autonomy to say, this is not acceptable.
Right.
We don't want it here anymore. And it just seems like we're kind of the we're the doormat because we're a public entity. And I guess it is what it is, but it leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, and I realize it may sound like making excuses. We're kind of revisiting a presentation we've made at least 3 times now in terms of a homeless forum, a follow-up homeless forum, and a forum. SDI asked that we meet with SDI members, and so part of that message is on a topic-by-topic basis. What is actionable as it relates to loitering, public and private? What is actionable or not as it relates to public intoxication? What constitutes a public disturbance? And almost across the board, it's not near what the average person might expect, nor what you may recall from years past. That's not to say there aren't citations to be had and actions to be taken, but if we are going to have that conversation, it's crucial that we have a baseline understanding of what enforcement options we have.
Well, I come back to, you leave your vehicle sitting in a parking space, at some point you can be cited for being overparked. So that parking lot's for parking vehicles, the sidewalk is for walking. And as I drove down here today, that sidewalk was impeded by people laying in the middle of it. So, I don't, like you say, we're not gonna rest our way out of it, but maybe we should look at another public forum like we did a year ago, sometime this fall.
Well, I guess the question to be asked would be, do we have any law in the books that prohibits that person from sitting in that same spot on that sidewalk 18 hours a day?
Not at the moment. It is being drafted. We had one, or at least we thought we had one, in the process of making amendments related to special events. Unintentional confusion was created. We need to clear that up.
Would that come under the general term that we probably grew up with as loitering, or is
I'm
it some,
hesitant to use the term loitering anymore. Other than on private property, I'm not prepared to say that the loitering is there's some limited circumstances, minors in proximity to liquor establishments, but the common perception of loitering, I'm not sure is actionable.
Okay. And there was a consideration also of turning that parking lot over to a private entity, such as SDI, so that, in effect, private property owner rights could be used to limit who's using the space and for what.
Again, I know it sounds like I'm making excuses or I'm being obstructionist.
No, these are just ideas floating around.
Whatever topic it might be, the first thing we've got to do is be prepared to enforce it objectively and so, or consistently across the board. And so, as we had conversations about curfews and impacts on the parking lot, we have parking lots that are used. It is not a park and leave when the event's over. We have residences in the downtown that are using our parking lots actively 24 hours a day, and so we struggled but for what I understand a lot of people's intent may be to very specifically carve out a demographic, which is not an approach that's defensible. We were hard-pressed to say we could come up with an application that basically closes the parking lot at a specified hour of the day.
So we have the more daunting task of not focusing on the homeless people, but coming up with several $1 million to focus on homelessness, which would then include the homeless people.
There are communities that are certainly doing that. Doubling back, looking at our public urination citations, the vast majority of those are bar patrons. They're not homeless people. And there's not a recurring population that are repeat offenders so much as the camping ordinance. The camping ordinance, about 18 people represent about 75% of those violations. They're getting cited over and over and over again, but it's not changing their circumstance to where they no longer camp in public.
And PD has stated at other meetings I've attended that they estimate only 20 to 30% of those people over here at 7th Street are actually homeless. Mm-hmm. It's just a hangout, a party place.
And so we've had conversations about impeding the sidewalk, and being on the sidewalk is not necessarily impeding it, but completely obstructing it is. Then we have to catch them in the act. We have to cite them and move them along, and then we have to catch them when they move back when we drive around the corner.
Do we know what the cost is on our court system to keep processing these citations that are never going to get paid?
No, we haven't quantified the cost.
Cost and time. I mean, 'cause if it's If we're using the resources and knowing we're never going to get the money, it
Right.
may be.
We know the volume, and the conversation I had this morning was just verifying when we say that there was a failure to appear, a warrant was issued, and they appeared in court. That means we physically went and found them, served the warrant, and delivered them to court. So and that's the vast majority of the citations, like 90% of them. So I haven't got a dollar amount associated with that, but that is a staffing volume.
I used to talk about non-value added activities, and if we keep doing something that doesn't result in any change in the behavior, then we might want to save the money, resources, and time and come up with a different tact. I mean, because I'm assuming we have no interest in incarcerating these people, because then we really take on a huge cost.
We don't have the ability to run a debtor's prison, so you don't go to jail. We can garnish wages, but there are no wages in question here. We can't garnish, disability benefits, things like that. As the mayor mentioned, these are not fine, and these are not violations that individually or collectively rise to imprisonment. Okay. So, having said that, the conversation that we had this morning was, we are at a high volume of citation currently, but is there some tipping point that changes their behavior, temporarily or long term? I think maybe temporarily. I don't expect the long term. I mean, I think the likely, if we don't have programs, we don't have assistance, we don't take a different tact, it's like squeezing a balloon. We'll motivate them to not be at that particular location anymore, but their circumstances haven't changed. They're still homeless, and they will end up at another location.
Yeah, and I guess that was kind of mine, I call it taking inventory, for lack of better, as to, what are we actually, kind of dealing with. And so so anyway, that was.
But okay. The other thing I told the mayor is, I've had conversations with multiple of you and others that acknowledging that it's not unique to Salina, but that doesn't mean we give up. Yeah. I don't want to convey the message that we are not actively having conversations at all levels of the organization about what's the problem, what are the tools available to us, how are we using those tools, is our use effective, is there a more effective way to do it?
Okay, is there anything else to bring before the commission? Okay, it is just a second. We are coming to Citizens Forum. This is an opportunity for anyone to come up and address the commission. We ask that you please give your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. So whoever would like to come up first.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Mike.
Rose.
My name is Rose Bass. I live at 1205 North 3rd here in Salina. I worked at the animal shelter for almost 28 years, retiring in 2014. So I am concerned about a few things that's going on at the animal shelter, and I'd like to bring it before you today. I'm speaking on behalf of a number of concerned citizens who share a deep love and concern for the welfare of animals in our community. We have come together to petition for the restoration of regular open hours at our local animal shelter like they used to be. This has proven to be an invaluable resource for the animals and the public. The pandemic presented numerous challenges, and the decision to implement an appointment-only system at the animal shelter was understandable. However, with the situation improved and the lifting of restriction, it is vital that we adapt our practices to better serve the animals, pet surrenders, owner claim, and potential adopters. Open hours at the animal shelter have historically played a crucial role in facilitating adoptions and ensuring that animals find loving homes. The ability for individuals and families to visit the shelter, interact with the animals, and experience their personalities firsthand is an essential part of the adoption process. By limiting public access, we are inadvertently hindering the chances of these animals finding loving homes. Furthermore, the pandemic has taken a significant toll on mental health, and our animal shelter has always been a source of solace and joy, and emotional support for our community. Countless studies have underscored their therapeutic benefits of human-animal interaction, including reduced stress and depression and companionship. The significance of the animal shelter in our community extends beyond the animals themselves. It serves as a catalyst for education, volunteerism, and the cultivation of empathy and compassion. By reopening the shelter, we revitalize these invaluable opportunities for community members to engage with the animals and learn about responsible pet ownership. Allowing the public to freely visit the animal shelter and walk through the kennels, we can increase adoption, pet owners renting or reuniting with their lost pet sooner, and free up kennel space. Sorry guys, I'm a little rusty. I haven't done this for a while. The shelter's full. We hear that all the time, but they won't accept animals because they say they're full. Open the shelter like it used to be. We're post-COVID. All the shelters I contacted are back open their normal hours. Short-staffed, so were we. I had employees off for surgeries, maternity leave, sick days, vacation, and sometimes months when we were in the hiring process, but we were open. Lawn service, we did that too. We did all the mowing of the animal shelter and the dog park. We kept the grounds immaculate. And that showed. It was reflection on our community. I understand now the volunteers was bringing their lawnmowers and from home and doing the mowing. I don't understand that, but now I've heard that they've hired a lawn service. And do they even use the well that was drilled on the property? I had a well drilled so we could irrigate the dog park. Speaking of the yard, we drove by the other night and two big spotlights that had always shown on our beautiful artwork that we were so proud of weren't even on. Were they burned out? How long? Does anyone even care? Private cremations, we did private individual cremations, and I can tell you this was something that mattered in our community. It did. And now they go to Junction City. Trap loan, no more. You have a problem with wildlife, you're on your own. I know. I had my own trap. We had a skunk. I called the animal shelter. They told me, you take care of it. We don't do that no more. City license, now you have to go online to get your city license. This was something that we done at the shelter. School and civic talks and tours to teach what goes on at the animal shelter. I don't even think they do that anymore. I have to ask why the name Animal Services, why it's called Animal Services. What services are they providing now? They have more staff than I did, you know. And we had some great volunteers. I know.
That's fine.
I know. I have a lot to say, and I wanted to talk real fast. But anyway, I would like to see the plexiglass taken down and being able to walk through the shelter again. Those animals look at that 4x8 kennel all day. They're not that noisy. Yeah, they do bark, but you know that's not uncommon. You know, they need that interaction with the public as well. So, I hope you take this serious and open our animal shelter back up. So many others are. We need to be too.
Thank you.
Good evening. Carolee Jungle, Millview Avenue, Millview Drive Road. I had an interaction with the animal shelter this last week. I called on a Monday morning, left a nice message. I was clear, concise, gave my number. My reason of calling was to provide a donation, as I had recently lost my dog. And no call back. They're in my phone. I should recognize the number, so I didn't ignore anybody. However, I went in the next day, and of course there's a buzzer that you ring. I did. I was allowed in, and my first question to them, 3 people at the desk, not answering any phones, the phones weren't ringing. And I was told by all 3, will we answer our messages? I said, okay, did my call go to some message box somewhere else? Because I never got a call back. Well, you must not have called the right number. Maybe you called Salina, California. I lived in California, I know area codes, so that wasn't it. And I got a little upset, but kept my cool because, you know, it's okay. You can have all of your excuses, but they're not doing you or me any good if you can't accept donations. So my time of calling them and explaining what I was trying to do was ignored. I was just given the argument, well, we answer all of our calls. You didn't answer mine. And I've heard by many citizens in the neighborhood, try calling animal shelter. Hopefully they will return your call. Mine was never returned. No wonder Salina is leaving and going to other venues to find pets. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Linda Reynolds, and mine is just a personal experience. I lost my dog a year ago. We were finally ready in January to get a dog. I went down there and I was told I needed an appointment. So I called and got an appointment. They said, "Which dog do you want to see?" And I said, "Well, I thought maybe I could see all of them and see which one I bonded with." No, that's not how we operate. You have to pick out a dog that's on the internet. I picked out a dog. I went down there. I was only let in the front area. They brought the dog out on a leash, and one of the workers stood there while I was supposed to interact and meet that dog. I've gotten all my animals at the dog shelter. We used to go out into the yard, test them out, see if we combined. We'd walk down the aisles to see which one kind of jumped out at us. We went into a little room and watched them. I stood out there for 5 minutes. I was limited to how long I could be with that dog. I love animals, so I adopted him. And he was a good dog. His name was Gus. His name still is Gus. But we went past through obedience school. We didn't pass with honors, but we passed. He was so strong that I was pulled down a couple of times. I still have issues with one of my knees, and it got to the point where people said, "You're going to break something. You got to find a different home for Gus." So I found a different home for Gus with children, and he's wonderful and happy. But do you know how that broke my heart? That I took that dog, and I didn't get to even interact with him. And the way it was awful, but that's just my personal experience with the animal shelter. And I have gotten all my dogs, even out when they were on 40 or wherever that place was. And every single one of them have been the best dogs in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lori Hall. I'm from Salina. I am a foster failure. It's noted there. I've adopted so many dogs from the animal shelter. But I first fostered them, and then I kept them. That's why I'm a foster failure. But I worked for the city for over 20 years. I worked with 3 of the directors of the animal shelter, starting with Joanne Ailes, and then Rose, and then Vanessa. And about a month ago, I went in to check to see if one of my dogs was in the animal shelter, and it was so dark in there, and the plexiglass, it was a cold, cold place. And if we are going to adopt these animals out, we need to open it up. We need to give the service back to the customers, because I felt like we were trying to serve them, the people working behind that plexiglass. When I used to volunteer at the animal shelter, it was a bright, lively place. Volunteers were really happy. The animals were happy. They got to go out. The landscape was beautiful. It just was a different place. And I just am asking that you please reevaluate what's going on over there, open it up, and bring that service back to Salina, because people really need it, and most of all, the animals need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Hello, my name is Mark Trussell. I live here in Salina. My wife worked for the animal shelter under Rose for about 8 years. I hear the animal shelter needs to be open. It's a public entity. It's not a private. Our taxpayers pay the funds for everything there, and it needs to be open. Are they hiding something? Obviously, because they failed the state inspection here just recently. That's the first time the shelter's ever, under Rose, it never. They said that was a jewel of Kansas, was Salina, Kansas animal shelter. Now might as well put our head in a hole. Somebody needs to be held accountable for that. I hear from a lot of the volunteers that if you butt your heads with Monique, she's the director, you no longer are welcome to come back. The volunteers clean everything. They say all the employees are on their phone just sitting around, doing nothing. They don't go out and drive around anymore. You guys are the head of Salina. Someone, I know that probably falls under the park department, but that director needs to go over there and start doing something. Somebody needs to be fired. Maybe a bunch of people need to be fired. Who knows? Usually the head person is the one that gets fired first. But it's a shame. Our dog passed away. We had to take to McPherson to get it cremated. It's just a shame that our tax money, we can't even go in. We got to have appointments. That ain't right. And I hope you guys all get together and go over there. You might have to make an appointment. But you should be able to go in there, especially you guys. You run the city. Same with the city manager. You all should be able to go in there anytime and inspect that place. So I hope something gets done. If not, I don't know what to tell you. Salina is just going down in a hole. That's all it is. You guys do a lot of work through Salina, try to keep Salina a great place. I know the homeless people is a problem, but man, don't let our facilities go down. I mean, at one point, I know they had $500,000 in donations sitting in there. I hear they don't have anything now. So what happened to $500,000? They should be accountable. I mean, you guys should know that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Ben Winholt, Salina. I wish I was a dog or a cat person. I'd be up here talking with these people too, but I'm not. So last week I brought up the condition of the Salina tennis courts, new construction that we have over there as far as the way the yard looked. On my way home, I drove by again and it was mowed. I had said that the grass was like this tall. It had been mowed, and I thought, wow, man, and no more get down here at the meeting, and somebody's out there chomping away. Later that evening, I got a message from an individual, and I'm not going to give his name, but here's what it said. I am listening to the City Commissioners meeting, and I've always enjoyed your comments and concerns, and I'm right along with you on the issues that you bring up. As to that note, I wanted to let you know that my company is in charge of the lawn for the tennis courts. We had it scheduled for last week, but due to the rain, we can't get on the lawn. A lot of the areas are muddy, and we don't want to tear up the grass that is established. I have reached out to them about the weed issue, which I told them I'd take care of to help aesthetics of the area. We were there mowing it during the meeting Monday, hence that's why it was mowed when I went by. Once again, I enjoy your comments and points that you raise up. I just wanted to let you know why it wasn't mowed last week. All right, I'm a man of good character, so I am letting you know that I know when I've spoke out of turn, and I am wrong, so I am apologizing to STA for them not taking care of the lawn. They do have an establishment. With that being said, I was going to bring up that once you have a blueprint job, that the contractor and the subcontractors usually have a one-year guarantee for any issues that are brought up and need to be corrected. And I found out just here before the meeting from the director of Parks and Recs that this is not the case on this contract, that the contractor did the rough grade and the City of Salina, Parks and Recs, did the final and planted the grass. So He has told me that this fall they are going to take care of it, but I think it needs to get taken care of a little sooner before the fall, because if you've got standing water and you can't even mow the grass, then this is going to happen again if the rains keep coming with that. So again, I apologize to STA, and hopefully, like this gentleman said, all of our stuff that we need to take care of that is owned by the city of Salina needs to be taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you.
Norman Mantle, Salina. Last Monday, the discussion was about water rights for some property that was purchased here in the county of Salina for a seed contractor, and who owns these water rights. Tuesday in the Salina Journal, the water rights issue was brought up again about at the Quivira National Wildlife Refuge and the Cheyenne Bottoms. It also involves the Rattlesnake Creek. Who owns these water rights? I've called a source in Colorado. The 10th Circuit Court has ruled that these waters and these water rights in the United States belong to the United States, and unless the U.S. Supreme Court has overturned this ruling, we know who owns the water rights. Like I said, I contacted my source. A stream in Lincoln County has dried up. We're running out of water. I have the water rights on this creek. I can't irrigate. We're running out of water. That's what you better be addressing. In a recent news report, what we need, national news in Saline County, we need a Jack Smith, a Paul Mueller, a grand jury installed. By the end of this year, you're going to see what direction this current country is going because of court rulings. Now about the homeless issue. The supervisor for the construction firm that is overseeing the jail construction stated at a meeting when the jail discussion was being brought up, the population issue is not just a local problem. It's a global problem. You're having homeless everywhere. So it isn't just a local problem.
Hi, I'm Vicki Kurbs, and I'm a resident of Salina. Been here forever. I'm an animal lover, and I hate the fact that the animal shelter is in the condition it's in right now. I've gotten all my dogs from the animal shelter, and they've been great dogs. Due to the fact partly that the volunteers used to take the dogs out twice a day. And the dogs were very friendly, and people got along with them, and we didn't have a bunch of mean dogs down there. I love my animals. I love all the people down there. Well, the volunteers are the greatest, and they do a lot for the shelter. And I would like to see the shelter get back to that point where the volunteers can be there and work and help out and do a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki.
Hi, my name is Laura Curry. I live here in Salina, and I guess the animal shelter is a hot topic. I'm new here and kind of, anyway, didn't know that. So I also have had some situations. I kind of was, the big issue first I became aware of when I rent out a room in my house to a young woman, and she and her boyfriend were driving down Ohio and watched somebody toss a kitten out of a moving car. And so they stopped and rescued this kitten, and she brought it home, and she asked me if she could keep it, and I was like, well, as long as my dog doesn't eat it. Well, thankfully he hasn't so far. But I called the shelter, and they told me that they were full. And I adopted a dog from the shelter. Well, I have two dogs. So one that I moved here with me that was a rescue that I got, out of state before I moved here. And then I adopted one in January who was a puppy, a stray that had been picked up here in town and then adopted out. I went in, made an appointment, brought my dog in. He's a fantastic little guy. And, but my experience, it was very odd going into the shelter. And, well, first of all, having to make an appointment and all of that. And then in moving here, I also found out that there's breed-specific legislation, which I, hadn't been aware of before. And so when I got my puppy here, I did DNA testing on him. And his primary breed coming from the shelter is Pit Bull. And he's 38% Pit Bull, which is his primary breed, and then followed by German Shepherd, and he's, 14 breeds of pure mutt. And so what that tells me is that, with the breed ban and all of that, that there's still a high number of, pits in town, that the primary breed of a stray dog that's going into the shelter and being adopted out is Pit. And I know that the shelter being full, I went to the Animal Advisory Board meeting. I know they have a number of pits that are filling up space and not allowing other dogs in. I've contacted the shelter and friends of the animal shelter about being a volunteer. I've been told they're not taking applications for volunteers. I have reached out as far as being a foster home to be able to have dogs come into my home as a foster. I've been told I can get an application, and I emailed to find out if they can email me one or if I have to go in and get one, if I have to make an appointment to go get a form, and I haven't. There's been no response from the shelter regarding my request to apply to foster. And so I'm kind of been looking at options myself on what can be done to help animals in the area, even if I needed to start my own 501c3 doing, because there's so many issues with spay and neuter. Animals, there's not enough, they're not being spayed and neutered, they're overpopulating, they can't go into the shelter, there's nowhere to go, the problem's just self-perpetuating, there's this breed ban, and I just see this cycle ongoing. I'm not sure how the city is addressing it. It seems like there's a lot of concerns, but just kind of wanted, being new to town in the area, not knowing all the background and everything. I know I've been reaching out to some vets, and I'm just kind of doing, I guess, a lot of networking at this point, trying to kind of figure out what's going on, what can be done. And more than anything, wanted to just kind of introduce myself and let my interest be known on the subject. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Schwartz, and I work part-time at a boarding facility for animals. And when I started working there, I had one dog. I now have 3, and if I had my husband that would be on board, I'd have more. But I just saw that people on the Lost and Found for Salina dogs, animals, I just read just a minute ago that they're not accepting cats. And so I'm a dog lover, but all animals are precious. So I don't know what's going on, how we can help, and I know an organization that you can be helping in. So, but I try hard, and if I can't take it, I'll try to find a home for another animal somehow. But let's do a better job with our animals here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say, while Ms. Reed is coming up, that since being seated on the commission, I have advocated to open this shelter, and I have gotten nowhere. After losing 2 dogs in the last 4 months, we have visited the shelter in Lincoln, Nebraska, and just Saturday in Wichita, and we walked right in, and we're free to go clear through the shelter with no issues at all. And they were very nice rental facilities.
Carol Reed, Salina, Kansas, and I agree with everything these guys are saying. And yeah, I think we ought to have that open, and I think it ought to be visible. I don't know, is that your responsibility as the city manager to make sure that's taken care of?
Pretty much everything is, yep. So I would acknowledge Commissioner Longblind's brought up the opening of the shelter. We've had ongoing conversations about the rationale why. We took a look at the availability of time slots and whether we were running out of time slots. So we've taken a look at it, but I'll commit to taking another look at it from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, conversations don't get much work done, unless you do something or act on it. I want to catch you while you were talking about the homeless, because my mom lives, which I've told you before, at Pioneer President's Place, which is right there at the bus location on 7th Street where all the buses park. And there is 60 residents in those two buildings. A lot of them are prevented from walking outside and feeling free to even sit outside at night, because you've got, and I don't want to sound heartless about these homeless people. I gave one a donation one time for fixing a bicycle, because he was sitting out there, and I told him I work at a bike shop. He said, no, I don't want to be under any kind of authority. So, a lot of them just don't have the desire. But y'all cut those bushes down, which looks really nice, and we had to do that at Pioneer President's Place, was remove the bushes because they were sleeping in there and storing their goods, and it's a scary place for senior citizens that are living down there to have to, they can't even walk around and feel free at night or during the day. My mom can't see well, so she can't walk around because she can't see who's approaching her. So anyway, I think it's a really a desperate situation, and I know cutting the bushes out, but all that did was open up room for their lawn chairs. There's probably 15 of them out there that are out there bringing their lawn chairs and now sitting. But there are 2 huge trees there, and I'll give you a solution. If you cut those trees down and it's no shade, they are not going to sit there. They're not waiting on a bus. They're sitting there just congregating. So you might try removing those trees.
They just moved somewhere else.
No, one time. Sorry. Yep.
I can't thank these guys for coming. I just want to thank these guys.
Okay, you just did. Thank you. See how easy that was? Anyone else? Yeah. Please come up. Yep.
My name's Michelle Timpson, and I actually live in Ottawa County, but I just moved back from Colorado recently, and within the last year, I have rescued a pit bull off the Salina County, Ottawa County line that the animal shelter would not take from me. I then trapped a little dog out off Burma Road, who I now own as my own. And just recently, I rescued 3 feral kittens, and 2 of them are homed with me now. And I got no help from the shelter, Salina County Shelter. So I just wanted to voice my concerns moving from Colorado, where animals and rescues and dogs and cats, they have phenomenal shelters there, rescues, volunteers, all that. So I've had concerns with what I've seen and what these ladies have told me what's going on at the Salina shelter. And then when I called about the kittens and the pit bull and the terrier, they wanted nothing to do with it. So basically it was on me to figure out what to do with them, which is fine. I took care of it, and I now have 8 dogs. So, but I do live on acreage, but no husband, yes. But I just wanted to voice that concern that I don't even live in this county, but I'm rescuing dogs from Salina County because the shelter can't handle them, and cats. And the feral cat issue is a huge problem right now, and we need to somehow figure out how to get a mobile unit in here, get some vets to offer their time to do spay and neuters. We would spay and neuter feral cats one after the other in a day, and it worked out phenomenally. And we do the same thing with dogs in Colorado. So I'm hoping that things can get better here and we can move forward and have the shelter open and do their job, go out and pick up stray dogs like they should be doing. So that's it.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, with that, it looks like we have an executive session.
How much time do we need?
25.
Okay. Do we need a break in between?
5-minute break,
Be a
sure.
5-minute break?
Yep.
All right. So, Mr. Mayor, I move the City Commission recess into executive session for 30 minutes to discuss the special legal counsel, the subject of confidential legal considerations relating to the points of negotiation with Salina Destination Development, LLC, regarding the city's multifamily housing project based upon the need for consultation with an attorney for the public body, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship pursuant to KSA 75-4319, Section B, subsection 2. The open meeting will resume in this room at
6:18.
Yep, 6:18.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to move into executive session for 25 minutes with a 5-minute break, with the regular meeting convening at 6:18. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll see everyone back here at
So
6:18.
attendees will include myself, City Legal Counsel Greg Bankson, Deputy City Manager Jacob Wood, Assistant City Manager Sean Hennessy, and Specialized Financial Counsel Matt Webster will be online.
Okay.
And we don't expect any action
No action.
coming out
Okay,
of
thank
them.
you. Okay, we're back in session. I think we're going to take another 10 minutes, if you want to.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, I move the City Commission recess into executive session for 10 minutes to discuss with special legal counsel the subject of confidential legal considerations relating to the points of negotiation with Salina Destination Development, LLC, regarding the city's multifamily housing project based upon the need for consultation with an attorney for the public body, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship pursuant to KSA 75-4319, Section B, subsection 2. The open meeting will resume in this room at 6:30.
We have a motion and a second to move back into executive session for 10 minutes with meeting resuming at 6:30. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll be back at 6:30. are back in session, and there is no action to be taken, so I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn?
Second.
Motion second adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We will see everyone back here next week.